Hello, this is Jeff Vanderstelt, Executive Director of Saturate and host of the Saturate Podcast. Saturate exists to serve and equip leaders to start and strengthen unified gospel city movements that lead to gospel saturation, to the end that every woman, man, and child has repeated opportunities to meet Jesus through his church, on mission everywhere and every day. We believe this requires, Jesus prayed in John 17, that the church is unified, that they're actually working together, collaborating around 5 key initiatives that we see the Apostle Paul repeating over and over again, and Luke captures in Acts 13 and 14. And that is this movement of prayer where we together as leaders are praying and waiting on the Lord for direction and guidance, that people together are working on making disciples who make disciples, that like Paul did, he went back to a church and made sure they were getting strong and healthy, that we'd have leaders who are healthy. So citywide prayer, disciple-making strategies, leader health, and then serving the city in a way that looks like the kingdom breaking in tangible way. And then lastly, starting new initiatives that live these 4 out, that they're starting new churches, new nonprofits, new businesses that are really embodying these 5 key principles. So those are the 5 things we keep talking about. Those are the things that we try to even build our podcast around. A lot of times we will hit on one of them during a time. A lot of times it'll be a guest like we're going to have right now who's working through probably all of them in different forms because he's helping organizations and churches begin to innovate and creatively think through how they can scale what they're doing, do what they're doing more effectively, even capturing the vision of their organization in such a way that they're living it out in more fuller expressions. And so what we're going to get to do is talk about a lot of the stuff I just mentioned with Doug Paul. So Doug Paul is a managing partner and innovation strategist of Catapult. They, as an organization, help leaders build successful nonprofits that scale. He also wrote a book called Ready or Not, Kingdom Innovation for a Brave New World. He lives in Richmond, Virginia, along with his wife, Elizabeth, and their 3 kids. And he also serves as an elder in the city center of a diverse local church, which I want you to talk about a little bit, Doug. Tell us more about where you live, the work you're doing, and the church that you're a part of as we get started here.
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it definitely intersects with some of the things that I'm sure we'll be talking about.
So don't give us all of it yet if you don't want to. But.
Yeah, we'll keep some of that hidden. Yeah.
Okay, great.
I think the church that we've been a part of for a while and have served with, I helped lead the church and then transitioned out of that full-time work, was a church that was very focused on 2 square miles of real estate in the city of Richmond. And it is the 7th highest concentration of poverty in the United States. So the average household is going to make less than $19,000 a year.
Oh, wow.
And so the question is, how do we bring the kingdom to that? Because think about it, like $19,000, that's how much your average household is. It is going to be extremely hard to create a self-sustaining financial model that allows a church to flourish and be sustainable in that thing. So we had to be really innovative in thinking about how we were going to do that, what was required. And so, that got the better 10 years of my life thinking through and trying to integrate some of those answers into creating something that ultimately did become self-sustaining, and using language that I think a lot of your listeners would know, like it's a network of micro churches that have been, I would say, like very successful in what it is that they're looking to do. But it is very, very localized and focused on one little piece of the map of Richmond.
Wow. I want to hear more about that, but we'll hold off on that because the idea of the book is really all about innovation. And so let's just talk about that a second. Why did you write the book? And I endorsed it. I mean, I a lot of times I don't endorse a lot of books. One, because I won't endorse a book unless I can read it. And a lot of times I just got too much on my plate to be able to read every book that comes across my desk. But yours, I did. I mean, I read it. I loved it. I endorsed it. I think it's really great. Not only was it good for me in terms of it helped me, but I enjoyed it. Like, it's an enjoyable read. Like, it's very entertaining. It's carried me along. I wanted to keep reading. And that isn't always the case with a lot of books. A lot of books you read as a discipline, and other books you read because you don't want to put it down. I felt like that was yours. So Tell us why you wrote it. Let's talk a little bit more about it too.
Yeah, I think some of it is I didn't have a burning desire to write a book, but what I did have a burning desire to do was to simplify on some level, maybe even codify what I was learning about innovation and had really spent the better part of 15 to 20 years working on, and had read more books than I could shake a stick at, articles, podcasts, interviews. And at some point I was like, I kind of want to get this down in a more disciplined way. And the book came out of a desire to like do that. And then it was probably halfway written before I kind of came to the conclusion, you might as well just go all the way and do this.
Yeah. Well, you talk about kingdom innovation in it. So what is that?
Yeah, I think this is a funny one because I think we can all name this in different ways, but at least the way that like I landed on it was to say like it's something that you're doing that it's new, it works, and it brings glory to Jesus. So it's new. That does not mean that it has to be, there was not a light bulb and now there is a light bulb. It doesn't have to be no one's ever thought about it or imagined it before. It could just be a little tweak of something. Malcolm Gladwell talks about like some of the most important innovations that have happened in the last couple hundred years were not new things. They were things that existed that were tweaked just a little bit. It works, meaning it can't just be theoretically good on a piece of paper or a whiteboard. This is not a dreaming exercise for the sake of dreaming. It's actually, we're putting this into real life and it's got to work. And then last but not least, like this actually is about Jesus and his kingdom. Like, is this about advancing your idea or your ambition, or is this about advancing what it is that Jesus is doing and what he's trying to do in and through you?
That's good. This particular podcast is being released on New Year's Day. So kind of fun that it's like, like it's a new year, new ideas, innovation, that's fun. And yet not everybody likes new. Some people prefer old, things not changing. I think of a lot of, you and I both live in the space where trying to help people embrace the Lord is doing a new thing, that maybe he doesn't want us to keep doing what we've always done. Maybe there is innovation, but not everybody is always positive about that. And like, why do you think leaders, especially maybe Christian leaders, might push back against the idea of innovation or a new way, a new thing, a new tweak? What are some of the common reasons why they might push back?
I think at the heart of it, there's a real wrestling. And I want to say, I don't think this comes from a place of malice. I think there's a pushback because it's like, well, what we want to do more than anything else is to be faithful. Because in the kingdom, obedience and faithfulness, that's the win. Like we actually don't control outcomes. And so there can be this thing with innovation where if we don't understand it, that it is actually part of being faithful, then it seems like we're doing something to just chase a fad in order to sort of like conjure up the win or conjure up what it is that we want to happen and to make it work, even if the Holy Spirit isn't making it work. But I do think when we look at some of, just some of Jesus's parables, one of the things that he's like, look, I've entrusted some stuff to you. Are you being good stewards of the things that I've trusted you? And I do think sometimes there is because of like, this is how we've always done it, or, just preach the Bible, the rest will take care of itself, even though the Bible doesn't say that. It feels like sometimes we're a little bit like the servant who buries the gold talents that we've been given. And then we know how that parable ends. It's not great. So I think there's an opportunity for us to like embrace this pioneering creative spirit that God has given us, which like that's his image that has been imbued upon us. And so it's like, I think part of it is reinterpreting what it means to be faithful as leaders of these local communities.
Yeah. Well, just as an aside here, I think if we look back into the original story, Genesis, 1-2 in particular, as all things get started, God puts in the ground the actual elements needed to create, not only do we have this beautiful garden, but he's also got minerals and metals and all kinds of other stuff that's like literally in the ground that they're going to get to design stuff from. And he takes time to put it in there. It's in the scriptures. Yeah. It's like do something with this.
Well, I mean, like in man's first task is to name a bunch of animals. It's not because God isn't capable of naming animals.
That's right.
We're participating in that innovative, creative nature that God has.
That's right.
And is given us. And I think one of the things that just has always struck me, like when you actually read history, I'm just slightly like obsessed with some of the stories around these things that we see in history, is I think some of the greatest like movement makers and some of the greatest things to advance like human flourishing, they've been Christians. Hospitals didn't exist before Christians. It was us looking at a huge problem and actually advancing something that would be spread out through all of human civilization. Like it was Christians who did that. And when you actually start tracing like some of the greatest innovations of the last 1,000 years, particularly in social movements, they came from Christians.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so beautiful because it's like there is a cultural mandate we were given, and part of being a Christian is being fully embracing all of God's word, including the very beginning, before the fall. And so I think we are meant to be the most creative, most innovative people because we are being restored into the image of which he created us to be in the first place. So, but as that happens, as you're working with people, thinking, you guys are always working with people in some ways to get them to think new ways, to think innovation, catapult. That's a lot of what you guys are doing when you work with an organization. So getting them unstuck, finding a new way forward, helping them scale what they already have, all that requires some fresh thinking, innovation. As you see people wanting to innovate or working toward innovation, what do you see as the common barriers that prevent them from going there?
I think there are a couple. I mean, I'll name two because there are a lot of barriers, but one of them is there's this quote that it's impossible to get people or organizations to change until the pain of not changing is greater than the change itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've run into a brick wall enough times of something not working, and there's got to be a better way, that you're like, it's going to be more painful to stay in the status quo than it is to change. And I do think sometimes we avoid some of those harder conversations. The second one, and there's a cruel irony in the second one. And I think particularly for your listeners, this is you'll be able to recognize probably yourself in this. It's called the curse of knowledge. And the cruel irony is this, that the more successful you are at doing something, the harder it is to see other ways of doing it. And so if you think about whatever vocational choice that you've made, if you're a pastor or ministry leader or something else, like you're probably listening to this and you've been at least moderately to very successful at doing that thing. So if like you've always led a church in a particular way, it's really hard to lead another model of doing church because you've got all of your blinders up for how to do it. You become a prisoner of your prototype. And so I think that's the biggest one, is successful leaders who want a different way, but are almost chained to seeing the way that they've always done it.
Wow. As you said that, I was thinking of a particular leader I've interacted with the last year. And every time I've been with him, helping him try to think through new ways to live out leading the church, he kept saying, yeah, but what we used to do, it worked. I mean, the number of times he said, like, we were huge, we were growing. I said, that was a long time ago. Like, he's still living like 20 years ago, still thinking if he just runs that play, it's going to work. I'm like, the world has changed so much. Like, you are just not living in the 80s anymore. Or 90s.
And even that, I mean, I think there's this cultural phenomenon that's happened. It started, you can track it, like from a research perspective, you can actually track it. It started in 2008. And it was starting roughly in 2008, but it really took off mid-2010. Is you have this little thing in your hand called a smartphone, but we don't, like sociologists call this an epoch-defining event. Like there was civilization before and after this thing. And now the majority of people in the world have a smartphone, which we know is a big deal, but what has happened is it means that the amount of change that happens that used to be in the rate of a generation, so like 18 to 20 years, is now being compressed into every 18 months. So that means like culture is reinventing itself every 18 months. And so it's not that this pastor who you're referencing is leading only one generation behind. They're actually leading like 10 generations behind.
Yeah.
It's not really 10, but like
Something
5 or 6.
Like that. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
There's a bigger gap than we think.
Yes. Yeah.
And the people who are Gen Z and younger feel that more than we do, and people who are perhaps older than us. But it's that gap is growing.
Yeah, it is. Wow. So curse of knowledge, getting really an expert at something, and then that something is no longer the thing that's going to help you. Like, you talk about the moonshot being a way to kind of address that challenge of the curse of knowledge. Like, talk about that. How does that help us work through it?
Yeah. Well, let me back up and say one more thing, and then I'll jump into that.
Okay, great.
I think innovation is a skill set you can learn. And so if you want to get really, really good at, if you're thinking to yourself like, well, what's a skill set of the future that I should learn? This is one of them. Because it's not saying like you're going to come up with one idea for the rest of your life and you're going to just live on that one idea. It's saying the ability to not just have one idea, but lots of ideas, and to iterate on them and to grow it. And you can if you learn the skill of innovation, you can keep doing it. And so you won't be obsolete in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years because you've got this skill that is transferable everywhere you go and everything that you lead.
So how do you do that?
How do you learn the skill?
Yeah.
You should read the book, Jeff. And listeners.
Well, I know, but
that's really in the book we can talk about it in a few minutes, but like I think I lay out like the 5 stages of the skill set itself.
Yeah,
like that you need to learn, and what some of the stages that we skip.
Okay, so we're going to get to that. Before we get to that, so now you have the idea of this moonshot. I mean, you talk about it. I don't know if everybody knows what that means. Even Catapult uses that imagery of going to the moon.
Yeah. So the idea of the moonshot, we didn't come up with this phrase. It was when Kennedy said, hey, we're going to go to the moon by the end of this decade and bring that astronaut home safely. They did not know how they were going to do it yet, but they knew that the technology was advanced enough and would keep growing enough that it was a goal that was reasonable, but it would break all of their systems. And so if I were to say to you, like if you're leading a church, I want you to grow the number of people who are disciple makers by 100 times, like a multitude of 100, and you've got 3 years to do it. Like, chances are the systems that you have in place for that will be broken immediately. And what it forces you to do is if you're designing with the end in mind, you're going to have to think completely differently about how you get there.
Yeah.
And so that's the power of the moonshot, is it forces you to see what we're doing now can't do it. So what could do it? And it forces you around the walls that you've got because of the curse of knowledge.
Okay.
Great. It's not that you are dreaming pie in the sky and possibility. You should still have like a reasonability filter. But I do think what is reasonable is bigger and different, I think, than many of us have thought or experienced.
Great. And even that ability to envision a different future is part of the way that we begin to open the creativity and the necessity for innovation in our process. And so with that, then let's talk about the 5 that you lay out in your book.
Yeah. Well, they all, I mean, like, I'm a good product of evangelical culture, so they're all going to rhyme or be alliterated, but we went the rhyming route. So I'll lay out the 5 words and then I'll break them down just real quickly. So It's identification, ideation, experimentation, mobilization, and multiplication. So with phase 1 identification, it's actually making sure, like, have we identified the problem we're trying to solve? I think sometimes we are actually solving different problems than the ones that are staring us dead in the face. And so it's really framing the innovation that we're going after to make sure that we're solving the right problems. And that comes with asking really, really good and hard questions about what we're experiencing and just being ruthless about what's in front of us.
Okay.
The second one, ideation, people are familiar with this. It's like, we're going to generate ideas. I mean, like, it is what it sounds like, but it's not saying that all ideas are created equal. For every 100 ideas that you probably have one good one. And torture testing some of the ideas that you have to produce something that would actually be worth experimenting with, which is phase 3. And I think this one, phase 3, Jeff, this is the one that, at least in my experience, and I'm gonna guess yours as well. A lot of like ministry leaders and Christian leaders that we've come in contact with, this is the step they skip. It's if the idea is worthy in my head and it looks good on the whiteboard, I'm going to jump straight to taking it to market and going to everyone in the church. Like, we've cracked the nut on how we're going to make disciples who make disciples, and without ever trying it, we're gonna programize it and we're gonna get everyone in it. Rather than saying, like, what if we let's pump the brakes for a moment. Let's take a small group of people and let's see if it does what we think it's going to do. Mm-hmm. And almost every time it doesn't. And it doesn't mean that it's a flopping failure. It does mean that you probably need to like learn some things from the experiment that didn't work, take some of the learning and try again and iterate on it so that when you do scale and you do like bring it to everyone and hope that it has the potential that you want it to have, you have more confidence that it actually works in real life and not just, the theory of it.
Yeah. I mean,
pump the brakes there, because I imagine you have some thoughts there.
Well, like every good product that's ever been created had to go through a whole bunch of iterations. They brought it into, they have like beta versions. They do tests, groups. They run it through so many iterations to the point where you're like, okay, we now are absolutely confident this thing is going to be effective and it's going to work well. And I mean, you even watch Jesus with his disciples, them going out and coming back. We didn't know how to deal with this. So like, okay, let's teach you how to deal with, demons now. Like there's that process of feedback loops where we get to keep working on the thing and keep designing it if possible until it is effective. Yeah, absolutely. Because like we're so used to buying a model or a curriculum that we just put in place. And it's like, man, you know how many curriculums are just not good?
Yeah.
But we're just looking for that silver bullet, like if I can just get the one thing the first time, it's like, it's just not how things work. I didn't even parent that way.
Yeah. And I mean, even tying up to an earlier question you asked before, like just one of the stories that I love around this is Alpha. Like when Nicky Gumbel, in his 20s, went to a much, much, much smaller Holy Trinity Brompton, they had a membership class. And the membership class was like the raw material of what is now Alpha. But when Nicky looked at it, he wasn't thinking this works well for members. He was thinking this works well for people who don't know Jesus yet. And so all he did was tweak it. Like the quote, like using business terms, the core customer changed. It went from being new members of Holy Trinity Brompton to friends who didn't know Jesus of members of Holy Trinity Brompton. Huh. But the first time they did it, it worked okay. It was not a home run. And so they kept at it and kept at it and kept at it. So now like 30 million people have come to faith in Jesus through Alpha, which is like, wow. I think one of the most astonishing programs that exists right now in the church space. Yeah. But they didn't nail it right off the bat. They had to keep practicing, keep trying. And what we have now is the product of all of that experimentation.
Well, and they're still doing it.
And they still are, yeah.
Yeah. Like the stuff that's come out for youth now is different. Like they're constantly working on it because, the culture's changing. So they've got to keep experimenting. It's still going on.
Think about those 13 questions that the original Alpha was based on. That they're like, these are the big questions that non-Christians are asking. They are not the same questions that non-Christians are asking anymore.
No.
Like, can the Bible be trusted is not a question that a non-Christian in Seattle is asking.
No.
that has an implicit answer, but they are asking other questions.
That's right.
And so we have that's just a simple example of how we have to be flexible and adaptive enough to read the culture. What is the point of the innovation that we're going after? And how do we flex it? And how do we adapt it so that it really works for what we're hoping it'll do?
It's good. Yeah. When we're working on our disciple making lab with churches, we get to a place where we're like, okay, try it. Make sure you listen well to how it, what worked, what didn't work, what would you do differently? Like, keep the feedback loop going, because the first time you try something, it's probably not going to work that well. So you've got to learn, you got to iterate, you got to change. That experimentation phase is so key to developing something that works in your context, in your culture. And we're doing that all the time here in Seattle, because Seattle is known for innovation. So it's, as a culture, if the church isn't engaging in innovation on a regular basis and experimenting on a regular basis, you're probably missing a ton of learning opportunities. So,
and it's not a coincidence when the people who are the most pioneering, like, kind of dip out of your church.
Yeah,
because you're basically telling them that like apostolic pioneering / prophetic or evangelistic gift that they have and how they see the world, like, you're not interested in that.
Yeah,
you might be interested in their checkbook.
Yeah,
but that they'll write you a check if you think they value their mind and their skill set, and they're leaving because it doesn't feel like there's a spot for them.
That's right. Yeah, right now we're having a lot of interaction with the marketplace leaders here in Seattle, and I think in a lot of ways they're going, I don't think the church wants this. I don't think they want innovation. I don't think they want to think in different ways, and so they're oftentimes, like you just said, finding that they don't fit.
Yeah, and I think this kind of goes back to one of the other questions, like what's a barrier, or what might people push back against innovation? I think some of it is there's a certain fear that it'll change everything, and I think it could, but we don't know yet. Like we don't need to fear what we don't know in this case, where it's, let's say you're really tinkering around with, you want to figure out how to do disciple making and really be a catalyst for a disciple making movement in your place. But you're fearful, like, well, it's going to completely turn our church upside down and all the structure that we have. Like, it might, or it might not. Like, why are we don't know the answer to the question yet. That doesn't mean we shouldn't even ask the question.
Yeah.
So let's experiment lightly with a time-bound time over to the side, and then ask the question, like, well, now that we've seen that it works, what does that mean for the bigger thing, the wider thing that we're doing? And that's the next step, actually, in the 5 phases, is that question around mobilization, which is, if something works, now we're kind of pausing and we're asking, well, why did it work? What was that? What were the essential elements that made this thing go? And then we can say, what would it look like to codify that? A very, very light, simple, I don't even want to say system, but like repeatable process. And then what should we do with the whole church? Should it continue to be off to the side, or should we bring it into the center? And it slowly, over time, with very wise change management, would change things. And so, again, we don't have to know the answer to the question yet. Let's just ask the question and leave space to find the answer.
All right. So say all 5 again.
And then the last one, last one is multiplication.
Yeah.
Where, like, once you've codified it and you've gotten into a group of people, and in the DNA is, we want this thing to spread, and we've put it and set it up to do that. Multiplication is, like, how are we going to ensure that, like, it makes it easy for this innovation to get to as many people as possible? So the five are identification, ideation.
So identify the problem. Make sure we know what we're trying to solve.
Ideation. What are some different ways that we could attack this problem? What's the best way? Experimentation. We're going to take the best idea that we have and we're going to put it into practice, and we're going to iterate on it until it works. Mobilization. Now that it works, we're going to ask, why did it work? And how could we position it to really reach a lot of people? And multiplication is, we're putting it in the water with the intent that this thing's going to spread.
All right. Okay, good. So one of the patterns we see in scriptures and in just general history is that oftentimes your life becomes the laboratory for God to do something new or innovative in and through your own situation. So that's your life. I know that's your life. You're constantly looking at your life and everyday life as a laboratory for learning. Would you want to share any examples where you've seen that happen in your own life?
Yeah, I can give a couple. I mean, like, honestly, like, I imagine like a lot of your listeners and like you, a lot of this is just around parenting.
Yes.
I mean, I would say,
I was going to say that actually. I was going to say my poor firstborn, because
seriously,
it's like by the time you get to the last one, you're like, we learned so much by then, and like now we know how to parent, but now we're almost done.
Yeah. Exactly. I feel like in 5 years I can be supremely confident as my youngest leaves the house. But I think one of the things that we're doing right now, I've spent a lot of time the last 18 months really thinking about what it looks like to raise and disciple boys who are becoming men. Mm-hmm. My oldest son is 14, my youngest is 11, but my oldest is a girl. And I actually feel fairly confident in like how we're parenting and discipling and raising her, even as like every other day with a nearly 16-year-old girl. I'm wondering if this is D-Day after all. But I think I've struggled a little bit to understand like what does true masculinity, biblical masculinity in our culture look like? What does it mean? How do I intentionally raise boys to become men in a way that I think embodies the kingdom? And so we've started with like, here are 5, I'm not going to universalize masculinity. But here's how we're defining these. Here's what it means to be a man in our family. Like, here are 5 things that it means to be a man. And then we're designing experiences and learning around each of those 5 things. So like one of them is Paul, men do hard things. We want, like, I think there's something about masculinity that is like, there's a grit that when things are hard, we will rise up to the occasion and the task. Well, how do I instill that in my boys? And so I've been working on that for 18 months, not just the statements, but the things that go around that, and figuring out with conversations we have, experiences that we do, what's working, what's not working, what's connecting with them, because both of my boys are very different from each other. And so I want to contextualize even with my boys, not just at a church level, but like an individual level. Mm-hmm. What does it look like for boys to become men? And then we could break out into song and sing a little Boys to Men. So that's an example. I mean, seriously, like, probably have 100 examples of this, but that's the one right now that is like, it's live, it's fresh. Yeah. I think about it a lot. I'm reading about it a lot. It keeps me up at night. It's what I pray about. I mean, I pray about more than that, but it's definitely a focus and a concentration right now.
Okay, that's good. Good. Well, I even like that, because you even kind of walk through the process, identify the problem or the thing you're trying to get after. So now you got to do ideation around what is it that you're going to do with them. You're doing some experimentation of it. I'm sure as you discover more and more, you're going to mobilize and multiply that over and over again. The problem is you only have 2. So,
yeah.
Maybe this is why some people keep having kids. It's like, okay, I'm finally going to get it right.
By the 9th one.
Oh, man. So you also write about the why and how of an innovation, in terms of how it, when an innovation works, it might seem anticlimactic, but, talk about that first, and the anticlimactic nature of innovation, and why, for some leaders, that's a challenge, or that's a thing that they've got to embrace or face a little bit more directly.
Yeah, I write about this a little in the book, where it's called Archimedes' Revenge. And
that's right. Yeah.
If you remember like the ancient story, it's this idea that this brilliant man is sitting in his bathtub, and he finally figures out the answer to the problem. He screams, "Eureka!" He jumps out of the bathtub and runs naked through the streets of Syracuse to get to his laboratory. And he's had this, quote, eureka moment.
Yes.
And when we hear stories about like innovation in our culture, and I don't mean just the church, I just mean like in our wider Western culture, they seem built around these eureka moments. But when you actually dig into it, number one, that story almost certainly didn't happen. It's like folklore. But number 2, it's very, very rare that is how innovation happens. We want it to be like everything in American culture, which is a microwave version of something. Like
Yeah.
I put it in for 30 seconds, I hit start, and then it's ready. I turn the light switch on. It's arrived, and it's like this euphoric moment. Innovation more generally, or more than not, is something you got to work for. Like, and there's a grit and a grind to it. And it's learning little things that over time grow into a big thing. So it's stringing together all of these micro moments into something that is like connecting the dots to a bigger thing.
Okay.
And that bigger thing, when you finally see it work, it's usually like, it's not going from 0 to working in 60 seconds. It usually took several years of grit and grind work before you're like, it's all connected together now from soup to nuts, and it works. And it can feel anticlimactic unless you know that that's what you're looking for all along.
Okay. So how do you encourage leaders to know, okay, that's really what it is? It's a lot of trying, a lot of experimenting, a lot of learning over and over and over and over and over again, not like one big moment. Like, what's the encouragement to them?
I think it's start with smaller time-bound experiments.
Okay.
Like most pastors I know have at least one thing that they've always said in the back of their mind, I bet this thing would work. Like, what's the 3-month version of that theory you've got? Like, what's the smallest group of people possible? Is it 1 person? Is it 5 people that you could test that theory with? And you let them know they're going to be guinea pigs, but keep it time-bound. And start with the end in mind. Like, how do you know if it's going to work or not in that little 3-month micro experiment? And write those things down so that when you are discussing whether or not it worked, you're coming back to, okay, before the passion of whether or not this thing worked got involved, here's how we're going to measure whether it was going to be successful or not. And then you just keep doing that over time, learning from those 3-month increments to build to something you're like, okay, we know what we're dealing with here. We know how to catalyze a disciple-making movement now in our place, not in someone else's place, in our place.
You know, it's interesting, as you said, that a memory was jogged for me when in the very early days of Soma. Well, I should even back up before that. So some people don't even know some of the origin story of Soma goes all the way back to Chicago. Janie and I had 2 pretty good friends that we would regularly do special dinners with. So Caesar and Tina Kalinowski would do these amazing, like 5-course meals or whatever. And we would, I eventually taught them that you can actually pair good wine with each part of the meal. And I mean, we'd have these amazing dinner parties. And I mean, they were the best, partly because they're incredibly gifted at hospitality, but we'd sit around and have these meals. And then I remember one moment we were like, you know what if church was like this? Like, what if this was the norm of what church was like, and then fast forward a little bit, Janie and I move back to Seattle. We start a core group that leads to a church plant called Soma. Caesar and Tina join us about a year into that journey. Of course, they bring all that with them, but that idea had been seeded into the beginning of Soma. And so every time we'd gather, we'd have a meal. That just became part of the Sunday expression. Well, as we grew bigger, we realized, man, this is getting harder and harder. But the next thought was, well, what if we did what we did? What if we trained everybody to do what we did? And we took one Sunday a month and we didn't even gather in the building, but we said, hey, throw a meal in your home. Either do it during brunch, because we all know that anybody who's home on Sunday morning is not a Christian, like all the Christians, quote unquote, are in church in Seattle. So like you'll guarantee to get the right people in the room that you need to meet and share the gospel with. So we, with nothing creative, we just called it Breakfast Club. We did it the first Sunday every month, and our church, our evangelistic fruit grew like crazy just through that one little, not that big of an idea, but it started way, way back in Chicago. And it germinated over the years to become this thing that we got everybody to do. And pretty soon people were reaching their neighbors in ways we had never done before. So, I mean, it's pretty much what happened, what you just described. It wasn't that impressive, wasn't that remarkable, but it was definitely an innovation from how we had been doing church before.
Yeah. And I think, I even think from my own, like this is an important one where like, if innovation is a skill set, it becomes over time, like kind of like a way of life. And so you're not always thinking, how is this thing that I'm experimenting with going to change everything so much as like I have an idea and I just kind of want to tinker with it. So one of the times our family we had talked a lot about like Acts 2 and 4. And one of the things that's always struck me about reading those stories is people want the fruit of the community of Acts 2 and 4, but they're not actually realistic about how that fruit arrived. Mm-hmm. And when you dig into what it is that these people were doing, you're like, community had to come out of that because it was so hard, what it is that they were doing. If for no other reason, you're like, they were meeting together every single day, twice a day. And they were sleeping on top of each other in an ancient city that wasn't built for a 20,000 person population increase because every Christian moved to Jerusalem for 8 years. It was wild. And so what we were like thinking about is like, what would it look like to actually just try that for 40 days? And so we got a group of people together and we're like, we're going to do house church every single day for 3 hours a day for 40 days. And at the end of the first night, I remember my wife and I were lying in bed and we're like, is there any way out of this? Like, is there any,
I was just going to say, are you nuts?
It did not go well the first night. And I won't go into the reasons why on this particular podcast. I'll tell you offline, Jeff. But I was just like, is there any way? But within 40 days, a short, compressed amount of time, and be like, oh, I can see why they were sharing everything in common. And I could see why there are no needy persons among them. I could see why there was such great love and affection. Because it was, when you are on top of each other that often, you got to deal with your stuff. It's unavoidable.
Yeah.
And so like that didn't even turn into anything. It's not like we were then like, all right, we're going to take this church wide. It was, I wanted to learn some things.
Yeah.
And the experiment was not for the church or for me as a pastor. It was just like for our family. We wanted to learn.
Wow. You really did it.
Yeah, we really did it.
I've never heard that. You never told me that story. That's crazy.
It was and it's so funny, like all the things that you saw is like the fruit of that kind of work in the book of Acts. We saw all of that happening. We saw people come to faith. We saw and it wasn't because we were directly going for the results of the fruit so much as we were putting in the inputs and there were outputs. And that all I can attribute that to is the Holy Spirit was at work and we were on top of each other all the time.
Wow. Oh man. That's amazing. I have never thought to try that experiment. I don't think we're probably going to do it.
I was like, I won't do it again, Jeff. It was worth it for the 40 days.
Oh man.
We still talk about it.
I bet you do. Talk about
Andy Graham was part of that and his family.
Was he really?
Yeah, he was.
Goodness. Wow, that's incredible. That makes me even just think like, what kinds of experiments should we be trying though? Like I feel like we could spend an hour just daydreaming and brainstorming of like what are the things we ought to be trying as we think through these things. That's interesting.
Half the game is us taking, and I don't mean this in a, not putting like guilt or shame on people, like taking responsibility for our lives and our families in such a way that it's not the church's, like the organizational 501c3's responsibility to give me all the programming solutions for how to parent or how, like, that's my responsibility. I'm the parent.
That's right. Yeah.
Like I'm helping to leave my house. So what do I need to learn to do that well, knowing that I'm never going to be done with that process? And then we can talk about groups of people, 6 to 12 families, and then we can go even bigger. Because I think what we tend to do as pastors is we think organizationally. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the little nifty things I learned early was like, if I'm going to learn innovation, I got to start at the smallest level. That's me and my family. And then I can move bigger. Because if it's not true for me, it doesn't matter if it's true for anyone else.
It's good. So coming to a close, what would be some practical tips? Just coaching leaders on how to really press into this, the process of innovation.
I think I'll give three different tips or just coaching I would give. Number one, whatever issue that you're identifying, someone or something is happening on the edges of your church or your relationships where there's already breakthrough happening. So there's this quote that I've loved for a long time, and it's that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed yet. And so on the edges of what you're familiar with and what's happening in your church, what you want to see for everyone is already happening. You just, A, may not be aware of it. And 2, you may not know how to like get it into the water for everyone. So when I was growing up, and I think this might be true of many, many churches, but I'll just say it was true of mine. There was one person who was like a disciple making, guru, master, something like for 50 years, he was just discipling people. He was a dentist and he was one of the elders of the church. And Dr. Tracy Spar probably discipled 300 people over the course of like 30 to 40 years. The problem is the thing that was missing is that those people didn't then go and do the same. But he knew in the context of where I grew up how to disciple people really well. What if we could unlock what Dr. Spar knew and like teach other people how to do it and train other people to do it and then figure out how to make it reproducible? Dr. Spar was on the edges of what it is that was happening. I would have loved to have like unlocked what he knew and get that into the water. I think that's the first thing, like being able to identify. Sometimes we're looking for the solution to problems, but sometimes they've already been answered. We just don't have eyes to see them yet. Yeah,
man, as you're saying that, the story, I wrote this in my first book, Saturate. Well, I was talking to my dad. I was in a time when I was really not sure about my future in the church and all that, working through a really challenging season. And he said, we just hired a new discipleship pastor at our church. And I'm like, really, why? And he goes, well, because I guess we don't know how to make disciples. And I'm like, Dad, but I watched you and Mom open your home all the time. Like, you're a businessman who saw business as a place of ministry. And I'm laying all this out. He goes, yeah, but that's not what they mean. That I don't think that counts. I'm like, what in the world? Now, my dad's not a highly educated person. He's very like down to earth, blue collar business guy, but he had been doing this my whole life. And the church didn't even know how to recognize it and count it. I'm like, man, he's doing something a normal person could do. Why don't you just take that and populate that across the church? So same idea. Yeah.
There's this running joke that I always have that if like Peter, James, and Paul and John were to show up at our churches, we wouldn't know what to do with them. We'd just make him an usher.
Oh, God.
But like we don't have a system for understanding what they did.
Yeah.
And that is the reality of most of. There are Peter, James, Pauls, and Johns in your church right now, but we don't know what to do with them. And if we don't figure that out, they'll leave.
Yeah.
And many of them have, but that doesn't have to be the last chapter.
Yeah.
Like there's still time. Yes. So I think one is being able to identify what's already there. That's one tip. One is, I've already said, like, just start with your own life, the laboratory of your own life, and just run an experiment. Short, time bound, doesn't have to be like crazy, like 40 days of house church or whatever. Like, just feel permission to do that, not as a pastor or as a leader, but as a person who has been given a mandate and a charge within your family. You have a role within your family. What does it start? What does it mean for you and for your family to like actually take some responsibility for something that God wants to give you? And then I think the third one, it's not necessarily super practical, but it might be a paradigm or a mind shift, a shift in how we're thinking about it, is expect that it will take you 10 years to master the skill set of innovation. That this isn't something that you're going to figure out tomorrow, in the same way that it probably took you, if you are someone who teaches regularly, a good amount of time to master the skill set of your own voice as a teacher or a preacher. It doesn't. You've got that Tim Keller quote where he talks about if you only copy one person's voice, you sound like a clone. If you only listen to 2 or 3, you sound confused. But if you listen to 100, you'll find your own voice. That's kind of how it is with innovation. It takes time. It really does. And you're not trying to clone one person or just listen to 2 or 3. You're trying to find the way that you do it. And that'll take a good 10 years. But if you do that, I promise you will have a job for life. Maybe not in the one that you're at right now, but like it is the most employable skill set for the future. If you can learn that, and it's worth giving your time to.
That's good. Good. That's super helpful, man. Okay. So let's close with this. If people want to connect with you personally or with the organization Catapult, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, we've got a website that you can go to. It is wearecatapult.org. So WEARE catapult.org. And then you can also email me. You can just do Doug at same web address.
All right.
And
cool.
I'll be there.
All right. Well, I'm thankful for you. It's been fun to journey together these last several years. Me having a little stint with Catapult, and us trying that out, and then you helping us form this new expression of the Disciple Making Lab that it was really yours in a lot of ways, and we just got to take it and make it a little bit more ours. But it's got your fingerprints all over it. So if you've heard me talk about that, I'm grateful to Doug for the way in which he helped shape that and even graciously handed that over to us to be able to implement through Saturate. So, I'm thankful for you.
Can I plug that real quick?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
If you are a leader and you recognize and have conviction around making disciples who make disciples and are thinking like, if we can't figure this out, what in the world are we doing? I'd really encourage you, check out the Disciple Making Lab that Saturate is doing. It is just get on a call and hear about it.
Yeah.
It is absolutely worth your time.
Thank you so much. Yeah. I was just with some leaders earlier and I said, it's the thing I'm most excited about because I've seen it work more than anything I've ever done before. And so, yeah, thank you for your input into that and your shaping of that, but also just our friendship, man, over the years. It's been fun to get to journey together. Yeah. I appreciate you so much.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. And I pray 2025 is a great year for you, for your family, and for Catapult.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Happy New Year, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this session. I also hope you had a wonderful holiday season. As you kick off this new year, I just want you to know Saturate is so committed to helping you. We want to provide as much equipping content and resources as we possibly can to help you on your own disciple-making journey in 2025. We've got new resources that we've been adding to our Saturate membership. So if you're not yet a member, I encourage you to go to saturatetheworld.com and become a subscriber to our resources. It's a monthly fee that gives you ongoing resources, tools, videos, a ton of stuff to help you. We also provide coaching for leaders. If you need more specific coaching around some of the challenges you're facing, we'll be providing a lot of different training events for disciple making, for leader health. And of course, you heard Doug reference it, and I want to highlight it again, our Disciple Making Lab, which is a 10-month journey for church teams to work through designing and innovating a disciple-making pathway for your church. We'd love to help you with that. If you've not heard of that before, check it out. Go on our site, saturatetheworld.com. Under training, you'll see Disciple Making Lab. It gives a brief description. And if you want to talk to us, we'd love to get on a Zoom call with you and just share more about how we are committed to helping you and your team develop the best disciple-making pathway for your church as possible. So yeah, we'd love to serve you. We'd love to come alongside you. If you have any questions at all, please email us. hello@saturatetheworld.com is where you can send any questions. And again, we hope you have a wonderful year. Welcome to 2025.